तशरीफ लाते हैं सोहेल इसाक।
Have a little conversation with you about the journey of life over a cup of tea.
And very fine tea, I might add.
Thank you. Peter, tell us about your something about your life and journey towards the spiritualism.
Well, I began, I think what I recall first is being a child, less than 5, maybe 5 or 6, and noticing how the adults in my life all seemed to be a little striving and stressed and worried and flurried. And it didn't really make sense to me that this is the way we had to live our lives. And then after that, of course, then I began to grow into my personality, into my life. And oftentimes these things, these early inclinations can be forgotten. But I was very interested in music. My father, my uncle, my grandfather were all musicians. And so I naturally got involved with music and studied music at UNLV in Las Vegas. And I actually studied woodwinds, mostly saxophone. I was really interested in playing jazz. I wanted to be like the next John Coltrane. And he was a being who actually sought freedom.
Okay.
And little did I know that was the journey that I was actually on. Music as a career became disillusioning. Spent a lot of time traveling, no address, no roots, no home really. Playing a lot of music and getting good at it, but not really being...
Was it all within United States or you...
No, we went up to Canada. I was down in Canada on the Virgin Islands and Baja, down at the tip of Baja.
Oh, that's right.
And so I was in several different kinds of groups, of course. Coming out of Las Vegas, there was a lot of possibilities, a lot of things available. But it was actually quite disillusioning because it really wasn't what I wanted to play.
Oh,
and I didn't really have the confidence at the time to just kind of go after what I really wanted. So I kind of abandoned that part of my life. I decided that I should go ahead and do what everyone else was doing and make a good living and have an address and a nice car and all that stuff. Well, I did that for, 4 years was enough. And I did it in Las Vegas. And right away I realized that this is really not a way to find a purposeful and to create a meaningful life for myself. I can't speak for others. So I spent some time in Lake Tahoe really needing to unwind and let go of the past. And so I'd go down to the lake every day and meditate, even though I didn't really know what I was doing.
Wow.
And so
what meditation was that? What were you doing? You had some yoga or something just to exercise?
Well, at that point, I didn't actually have any instruction. And so I just would go to the lake and just be and breathe and experience the beauty of where I was and try not to worry.
Oh, okay.
And because I was just sort of burnt out from being in Las Vegas.
Okay.
And so then we took a long bus ride to Sioux City, my uncle and I. It was a couple of days and a couple of nights, and it was pretty intense. But on the way, a very significant thing happened. And this gentleman came up to me one day and said, "You look like you could use this." And it was a book about meditation.
Oh.
And so I took this book, which was by Ram Dass. It was called Journey of Awakening. And when I got to Sioux City, I started following the instructions.
So you immediately started reading that book?
Oh, yes. He was right. I really needed that.
And you think it's a spiritual guidance for you, or it was a path towards that? Or?
Well, it became a beginning of a journey of seeking.
Oh, yeah.
And so I practiced the meditations and worked on my own. I really didn't have a teacher or a guide, except for my own heart. which was calling me all the time to come back into what is true and real about myself, my being. It actually set me off on a journey of seeking.
So how different it was from like East and West? So before you were, whatever you were doing is probably, since you had no exposure to books like that, so it was all coming from your heart?
I believe that all of us actually have an impetus to find that spark of the divine that is within us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what called me.
Okay.
And fortunately, I was really ready to hear. And so I began meditating without guidance. And then I read some other books, Buddhist books and things like that. And then when I got back to Las Vegas, I realized that I couldn't stay there. It just was not where I could live. So I came to Boise, Idaho.
Oh.
And this was part of my journey of seeking.
So was that who was in Boise? So you had somebody in here, or you just drove one fine day and head towards Boise?
Well, my sister lived here, and I had been here before.
Oh.
And I'd always wanted to live in the mountains and in a beautiful place and get out of the desert and have a simpler life. And so I came and stayed with my sister, and I really didn't know where I was headed. I was seeking, though. I was looking for a way. And I was reading books about Buddhism and Hinduism and Bhagavad Gita and things like this.
So what other books you're talking about? Like
Well,
any particular book which you think?
One book that really, after I'd been meditating for a while, I thought, we begin to think we know what we're doing.
Okay.
And I read a book by Chogyam Trungpa called Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism.
Cutting Through Spiritual
Materialism. And basically that pulled the rug out from under my feet. And I read that book 7 times back to back. And it almost drove me crazy. But I kept pursuing this path. I kept pursuing and seeking because I really wanted to find what was true and real in my life. And then I came to Boise, Idaho. I got involved with a Buddhist center and a Buddhist teacher.
Oh, all right.
And so I met his name was Namgyal Rinpoche. I believe he's actually His Eminence, which is a very high being. Okay. And he's a Westerner who actually was recognized as a Tibetan Lama. And when I met him, for the first time in my life, I saw a human being that was truly present and awake. And there was no pretense. He wasn't a personality. He was a spirit that was alive and radiant and expressing through this physical life. And it opened up something within me that helped me to realize that this is possible.
So do you remember what year or what time?
Oh, I would have to say it was late 80s maybe.
Okay.
Not long after I got to Boise, and I actually had many opportunities to study with this teacher.
So he was already in Boise for a while?
He had a center here in Boise. His students had started a center called the Open Path, which actually still has a gathering.
Okay.
They still gather and chant and meditate. Okay. But he actually recommended that, and all this time I had music was behind me. I wasn't actually involved in music.
Okay. How long have you been doing all these things in Boise, like spiritualism in Boise?
Oh, probably since I've been here, about maybe 35 years.
35 years. So he moved from?
Well, his main center was in actually Kinmount, Canada. But his students had started centers all over the world. Mm-hmm. So he would travel from center to center, and oftentimes he would take his students and take them on a journey and have a meaningful time with them and a teaching away from their own everyday lives.
So was he moving from place to place, or just he was in Boise?
Well, his home was in Kinmount, Canada.
Okay.
And he's actually passed away several years ago.
In Boise?
No, he actually was in Boise shortly before he passed away.
Okay.
But he was his centers still exist and still go on, and they follow the teachings that he brought. Were basically teachings about awakening, recognizing your psychology and knowing how not to be a victim of it, and choosing from that place in your center of your being that is actually in alignment with divine will, which is love and joy and peace and abundant enthusiasm. And other things will happen, but as long as we remember that this is our purpose and this is our starting point and this is where we want to return to, then our lives are actually going to unfold in a wholly different way than they would if we just got it from the TV and went to work every day.
So somehow it's related to the Buddhism too. So where the Buddhism came into it, like you had some Buddhism centers in here too? Or?
Well, I lived at the Open Path for a couple of years,
Okay.
and that was a very eye-opening and awakening experience because I began to actually seriously meditate with instruction and practice, and I was there for a couple of years, and actually it really helped me to get my foot on a path, not just seeking, but beginning to find some of the answers I was looking for.
So the martial art part of it was something to discipline you physically get strong enough? What martial art played?
Well, the martial art that Namja Rinpoche had recommended was Aikido, which is
Tell us a little more about it.
Well, Aikido is a martial art that actually I would call it, you would say, the art of reconciliation.
Okay.
And it's a physical form, but it doesn't actually. It's not to create violence. It's actually to reconcile violence into peace. We practice in such a way as to find our center, to engage our energy being, to engage our spirit, and if there is, in training, of course, you have an attacker just so you can train. It's not a true attack, but they come at you with this energy, and you learn how to actually merge with that energy, and then direct it into a place that is more loving, more compassionate, and a reconciliation of peace.
So how helpful is in today's life for you?
For myself, it actually changed the way I actually live in my physical body, because it helped me to understand about ki energy, how to relax a little more and allow the energy to flow through me rather than trying to force things to happen. I would actually be more present and allow things to happen. And then be with that and then advance that in whatever way I could. So that was actually quite an awakening experience. And through that time, I had actually, before that time, I had actually met, well, the woman that actually finally became my teacher.
Oh, tell us about her.
Her name is Yelawan.
Yelawan, okay, yeah.
And when I first went, I was rather skeptical. Because I was used to martial arts, I was used to Buddhism. These things are very concrete and clear and straightforward, and this was a much more metaphysical path. And the teacher actually is an ascended master who speaks through a channel. And when I first came, though I was skeptical, I listened with my heart and I heard the truth. And every time I came, I could feel a presence. I heard the truth, and it kept bringing me back, but I wasn't quite ready to accept that this was happening in this way. So that's when I went off and studied more Aikido.
Okay. So how long it took for you to kind of get into it?
I got into it right away. She actually drew me into it by creating a circle. She actually would work with her students in circles, so we would learn how to cooperate with each other. And so she asked me if I would be a leader of a healer circle, which she began, and there was 5 of us that started out, and she trained us in meditation and prayer.
So do you have, or you had a place to go, or you could do it like anywhere?
We always had a center, a place where we met every Sunday and Wednesday.
Do you still have that?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And you're still practicing?
Oh, absolutely, and that's where I actually share most of my music, is at our Dharma Center.
All right. So
and outside, of course, in the yoga community and the chanting community and things like that. But she had me in this healer circle, and we would do some chants.
Okay.
And having been a musician, it would drive me crazy, because from the time we began to the time we ended, we would actually lose at least 1.5 octaves in pitch. And so then we got a harmonium.
Oh, so what? Yeah, that's what my question was. Where you started harmonium, how it came? It was suggested, or?
Well, it was actually my idea, because we needed something to keep us on key.
So why harmonium only? There are so many other instruments you can do that.
It just seemed to call to us.
Okay.
And I can't really explain why, but I actually dreamt about the harmonium before we got it. I had several dreams about it. we came to this place where I realized that I was going to have to learn how to play the instrument. But fortunately, I'd had musical training.
Yes.
And a good ear and the ability to create harmony for melodies. We began chanting with the harmonium, and over the course of years, well, actually at some point we actually decided we would start. May I back up a little bit?
Okay.
So we had gone to a prayer retreat up at a place called St. Gertrude's, which is actually a beautiful Catholic monastery. And the sisters there, they're Benedictines, and they take care of their people as though we were, well, Jesus. They treat everyone that way. And so we were driving back from that retreat, and the people I was riding with had this CD playing, and it was chanting.
Okay.
And it was a gentleman named Krishna Das, and this was probably over 20 years ago, 22, 23 years ago.
All right.
And I heard this, and it was exciting. It was like, I bet you we could do this.
So we will talk a little more about this instrument called harmonium.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little more about saxophone to harmonium.
Well, that's actually quite a journey, because I actually pretty much abandoned music. You might say I broke my own heart with it. Mm-hmm. And then when this harmonium thing came up, I dreamt about it before we got it, and I just fell in love with the instrument.
So where you got this instrument from?
The first harmonium wasn't very good. You can get really fine musical instruments in India, or you can get some that are pretty tacky. It just depends on how much you're willing to spend.
So where you got the first one from?
Well, the first one, I don't even know where it came from. The Dharma Center that I'm involved with got the harmonium.
Okay.
And then after that, I got two harmoniums from, each one was like a step up, from the Ananda Center in Seattle. And I would go when they had their shipment, and then I would choose the harmonium that was right for me. This harmonium actually was specially made for me by a company called Dutta and Sons.
It's from Bombay?
In Mumbai.
Yes.
It's a very fine instrument, and it has a very wonderful tone, the highest quality of reeds and things like that make the instrument more professional.
What is the difference between harmonium and piano?
Well, the difference between the harmonium and the piano is, even though they use the same keyboard,
Yes.
the harmonium is actually a wind instrument.
Oh.
It has brass reeds,
Yes.
and so you use the bellows to bring the air into the harmonium, which sounds the reeds, and it's actually akin to a harmonica, and also the accordion. So this is they're all part of the same family.
Same family.
Yes. And the harmonium actually originated, I'm not sure, I've heard two things. I thought it was originated in Britain.
That's what I heard, yeah.
And then it was actually, of course, at the time, India was a colony of Britain.
Yes.
And so they had harmoniums there.
Yeah.
Well, the Indian people, they recognized the value of the harmonium. When electric organs started to happen, the white folks couldn't really appreciate the harmonium because it was simple. But the harmonium actually has a magic to it that electric organs can never have. And it's because it breathes, it circulates energy, it changes energy. It's like a heart. And especially if you're doing a mantra with the music, then it actually begins to create that experience through the music.
Wow.
And it's really a wonderful, and the music, the harmonium itself is really akin to bringing people together.
So you think you'll be able to play us some of the...
I would love to, actually. I would really love to. That's what I really am most comfortable with.
So what you going to play on it today?
The song I'd like to play, there are actually three parts to it.
Okay.
And the first part is from Dances of Universal Peace, and it's called Holy Spirit Within. And then I've woven that with one of our Dharma Center mantras, which is Kopatare I, Kopatare On.
Okay.
And what that means is my heart hears in obedience, my heart hears in love. And basically that's a teaching and an experience.
So is it from Sanskrit or...
Basically, yes. Akin to Sanskrit. Okay. It's from my teacher.
Okay.
And then we'll follow that with another song/mantra that's in English and Sanskrit. And it's all pretty self-explanatory.
Oh, okay.
The mantra itself, you'll have to experience the mantra with your heart and with your being, with your whole being. But the English words, of course, well, they'll go into our head and we'll recognize them. And it basically will tell the whole story. And basically this song is, you might say, a job description of being human. And it's Holy Spirit within, help me to live as that which I am, bringing love, joy, and peace into the world.
So how old these mantras are?
The first mantra that we'll be doing, I'm not exactly sure how old it is, but most mantras are pretty ancient. And they carry a lot of energy with them because they've been from the hearts of thousands and millions and hundreds of millions of people singing them. Mm-hmm. And they gather energy, and when you join with that energy, you add to it and you become immersed in it. So Kopatarya, and actually ordinarily I would do this as a call and response, a kirtan, but that's not necessary because we don't have a kirtan today, maybe another time.
Oh, sure. That'd be great. Yeah, we'll bring in, yes.
So that's basically, and then it ends with the may all beings be freed from suffering, and with another woven with another mantra. But the whole thing will probably take 6-7 minutes.
Okay. And how long it took for you to get perfection in it and bring in mantras into harmonium?
It's actually been a process of probably well over 20 years, maybe 25 years. You know, music came back and you might say bit me. It never really left me, but it finally found me again and gave me another job to do. And since I was so involved with the spiritual community, with the Dharma Center and the teachings and the expression of truth and divine will, weaving music with it was just a natural for me. And eventually, you know, I learned things, I taught myself, I learned things by ear, and we started off by doing some Krishna Das mantras, and then I discovered that I could actually put my own harmonies and create my own music for the mantras. And so that's much of what I've been doing, is creating a lot of, creating music, original music and harmonies to go with mantras and spiritual songs.
Let's go back to Ram Das. And from that journey till the mantras you're playing today, you're chanting. So do you think it was some of it came from the Ram Das book, or?
Well, the Ram Das book was a gathering of different ways of meditating, and that was what it gave to me, was a structure to work with. I actually never became a student of Ram Das, but he did write that book and actually affected the lives of many people in our generation by his explorations in India, and he had other explorations that we don't really want to go into.
Have you ever had a chance to travel to India?
No, not yet. I sure would love to go, though.
What do you think the difference between what you're doing, what you're reading, what you're seeking is with the Buddhism?
Well, basically, I think that all paths lead to the same place. And it's a matter of your own dedication and discipline and actually willing to engage with the path. Buddhism is a very succinct and clear teaching as to how to know oneself and learn to choose, well, they wouldn't call it divine will, but learn to choose right action, right speech, compassion, wisdom, love, these kinds of things. So it's a path that actually helps one to know the mind. And they use mantras and a lot of meditation. And that actually helps us to, when we begin to meditate, you'd be surprised if you try to sit and be still and quiet, well, your mind is going to take off. And that's what our minds generally do. That's what they're there for, is to think and remember and storytell and problem solve. And when you discover that in your meditation, what you discover is that that's not what you're looking for. That's happening all the time. What you're looking for is a way to relate to that mind and expand from a place where you can perceive the thinking mind from a spiritual place, from a deeper place within your being.
So there's Sufism. You heard about it?
Well, the song we're going to do, actually, Dances of Universal Peace, is pretty well woven with, is woven in many ways with Sufism. I don't really know much about Sufism, but I certainly do appreciate their music.
So do you think if you ever get a little more chance, learn a little more about Sufism and how it's related to all this spiritualism and Buddhism?
Well, right now, my teacher gives us enough to work on that I'm really not interested in exploring another path.
Okay.
I accept other paths as part of my own because we're a very eclectic Dharma center. And they draw from all different sources. But mostly we do what they call pause, which is meditation, prayer, and lots of music.
Are you still seeking, are you going through a teacher or whatever, what you call them, like mentor?
Well, I have daily practices that are given to us through our teachers.
And tell us about your teacher.
Ilawan basically teaches us to bring our lives into alignment with divine will, rather than my will. This is a familiar teaching from Christianity, you know, divine will, my will.
Yeah.
But we actually learn to surrender what I think is right, to come into that place of knowing what truly is spiritually right, what is truly an expression of truth and love and joy and peace and compassion. And this is a way that we can actually grow ourselves through our practices.
So where you do that, like you meet the teacher at one?
Well,
every
we
day?
actually have services at 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock every Sunday. And then on Wednesdays, we have a prayer and meditation time.
So where you go for it? And do you have a center in Boise or?
Oh, yes, the center is up on the corner of Kootenai and Orchard.
So what time you normally go and what time you get into the teaching and spiritual feelings? And
Well, the main service is at 11 o'clock, and they offer
so
us...
what you have to do, like
Well,
to get
my
in
practice-
touch with your teacher?
To be in touch with the teacher, we actually have the opportunity to speak with the teacher one-on-one. And so each of us has a private time with the teacher every month or so. And so we ask questions that are pertinent to our practice, to our lives, and then they help to guide us into a place of deeper understanding. But my practice itself, I begin in the morning, and I spend at least an hour with my practices, and as part of it is, of course, breathing and being. But other parts of it are having to do with, right now we have a men's circle, and we're working a lot with coming into contact and merging with the Divine Father.
Oh.
And so I have practices that are related to that. And then also I work a lot with what's called the Bodhisattva Vow, which is a place of coming into compassion and understanding and awakening for all beings.
Elwan is your source,
Yes,
a teacher,
yes.
a spirit.
My root guru.
Root guru.
Yes.
So it's a spirit.
Yes, as we all are.
Yes. So what exactly you do some chanting? Or you play
Oh, yes,
some
we-
music? How you get in touch into that?
Well, the service usually begins with music,
Okay.
and myself and another being actually do prequel music while people are gathering, and then we om before the teachers come in, while they're coming in, and then there's usually a couple of songs, and then we do our meditation.
Okay.
We do, 15 minutes or so of meditation, of silence. And then the teachers, then oftentimes there's another song, and then then the teacher will then speak to us and offer us another way of seeing and knowing and unfolding our spiritual paths.
So where you live, how far you live from city of Boise?
Well, I actually live in Boise County. It's actually 36 miles from Boise.
And how far is your first neighbor in it? How far you live
Oh,
in
well, it's
Boise?
actually a small subdivision. It's not like what you would find like in Wilderness Ranch. We all have 3 or 4 acres at least. So our neighbors are not close by. We actually, from our place, we're at the edge of the subdivision next to state land. So we can't really see our neighbors, and there are no neighbors the other direction. So we're actually off the grid and have been for over 25 years.
So it's helping you in your living?
Well, we have the very basics of life, the things that are most important. Fresh air, clean water, quiet, solitude, beauty. And these are things that actually feed us, feed our souls. and bring our lives into a space of balance and wholeness.
So do you have any message if somebody want to come into the spiritualism, and what will be the easiest way to join the club?
I would say the easiest way would be to learn to focus our attention not so much in our thoughts and our minds, but to come into the heart. And the heart is a temple of divine fire, a temple of truth and light. And it's woven with that which we would all know as divine will. Its impetus is to love, to be compassionate, to be joyful, to be peaceful, to share these things with others, and to learn to be humble and oftentimes put others before ourselves. So I would say just to learn to breathe with the heart, listen to the heart, don't think about it so much, but just sit, be quiet, breathe, and then discover that aspect of your being that you recognize as having been you from the time that you were born until now. And there is a sense of being, a feeling tone, a way that you are that will always be with you. And this is basically your spiritual center, your soul. And so you learn to come into communion with your own soul. And in this way, you're woven with the soul of spirit, with the divine will that actually we try to bring our own lives into alignment with.
You think how helpful it is in today's world, where we see chaos and all these things around, and media is so strong, and 24/7 you can you stay really tensed just because of the news and the globe, and now on top of that the global news. Now it's not just we used to have just the local stations and local radio stations, but now anywhere you can get what's going on around the world, and majority of news, as we say, is not a good news.
No, it's the interesting thing about the news is it's a handful of people that seem to be in the news all the time. It's like the squeaky wheel gets the most attention. Most of the people on our planet are good-hearted people. They know that they know love, they share love, they create peace, they love joy. Who doesn't love a puppy? We all have these things in common. I think if we want to make a difference, just realize that most of the people in the world are not the ones that are making the news. And that for ourselves, if we really want to change our world, we need to, I think it was Mahatma Gandhi who said, be the change you would like to see in the world. If we want peace in the world, we find peace within ourselves, and we share that in our own realm. And it expands and grows, and it actually affects the collective consciousness. Yeah. So I think, the squeaky wheel is getting all the attention. But for the most part, human beings, like the song, Holy Spirit Within, the human beings are like that. That's their true desire. And that's what's in their heart. Once you find a pathway, you can follow it endlessly, because there really is no end to what's possible.
So let's come back to Harmonium again. Do you think you'll be able to play some chants for us today?
I would love to. Holy Spirit within, help me to live as that which I am. Help me bring love to all of the world. I ask for love in myself.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you very
It's
much.
my
Thank
pleasure.
you. Thank you. Thank you.